Well, hello. This is a devlog slash announcement of what I've been working on for the past month or so, and let's just go hop in here. First off, quote: "The only person who never makes mistakes is the person who never does anything." I think that's quite true. So I've been active. I've been doing stuff, which means I've been making a fair share of mistakes, and that will continue. But this is what I've been up to. So I've written a little blog post here, kind of going in detail of what I'm about to cover here in this video. So if you're more of a reader than a watcher, I'll link this in the video comment below. But this is what I've been up to. An open world RPG game engine for emergent story writers. So let me break that down a little bit. There's some unfamiliar terms and some terms that might not be familiar to everyone. So, open world RPG game engine. So, this is not a particularly new concept. A game engine is just something that someone uses to help them create a game. An open world RPG is essentially just a role playing game where there's a very large world that you can move around in and explore and so forth. So, that's a pretty familiar concept. Emergent story writers. So that's a little bit of a different phrasing, I think. So emergent story. So emergent stories. That's a familiar concept, right? So it means that you don't have a story written from the top down, but you have a story that emerges from the little pieces from below. But writers, a game engine for emergent story writers. What does that mean? A writer is someone who creates a story or creates content, right? And there's a lot of game engines that help people create the game that they want to create, which is effectively in a lot of, if it's kind of more of a narrative sort of game, like a puzzle game or something like that, it means that there's an interesting story that the game developer kind of has in mind that they want to share with the world, and they're expressing that story or expressing that wish to tell the story via the medium of interactive video games, right? And so that's really who I'm after here, or the people that are attempting to write some sort of game narrative, and they potentially are unhappy with the options available. I know that I am. So let's go over a couple of you know first of all, before we start off here, let's just say why you really should not pay attention to this devlog or what I'm up to or anything like that. This is a game engine. There's lots of other game engines in the world. If you're interested in creating a game, then you just want to do it quickly and now, then pick up one of those engines and go with it. So the three here I have listed that I'd recommend are RenPy, Godot, or Godot, however you pronounce that, and Unity. If you're more of a narrative storyteller, I would definitely go with RenPy. If you Godot and Unity can create anything effectively. So that's if you're just interested in developing a game, that's stop watching this and go watch some tutorial videos on that. So what this is, though, is a game engine, right? Like a RenPy or Godot or Unity, or I also have RPG Maker here, kind of listed down at the bottom there. But unlike those, I'm going after it in a little bit of a different way. So it's not a general purpose game engine, I'll say. Like a Godot and Unity are more general purpose engines. Like you can make effectively any kind of game you want in those engines. But something like a RenPy or an RPG Maker, those are tailored to a specific kind of game that one wants to create. Now, you could probably create anything in RenPy that you want, but it's just not, it's not designed for that, right? You're going to be beating your head against the wall. But there's some good things that come from constraints, right? So RenPy, I haven't really messed with RPG Maker. I've just kind of, seen it on the periphery. I've never played with it at all. But so I'll talk about RenPy. I've at least somewhat familiar with that one. They're constraints, right? And the constraint is essentially trying to create something like a visual novel with RenPy. That's what it's kind of for, in a sense. And so it's pretty good at creating a visual novel. Now you'll notice that all RenPy and RPG Maker games falls into this as well. They all have a certain look to them, right? They all have a certain feel, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. Like I think it's not like when I open a book, right? It has a certain look and feel, right? There's paper and there's a font on the page and so forth, and there might be an illustration, there might not, or something like that. But there's a certain format to the packaging of a book, and that familiarity means that it's easier for me as the reader to actually consume what the let's say the novel writer is trying to get across, right? Because I don't have to, like, you don't have to figure out how to open and turn the pages of a book and so forth. Like, I've done that many thousands or millions of times. I don't know at this point. And so so it's good to have, in a sense, it's just simple, right? It just means that there's less barriers in a way between me and the actual author of the work, because I, as the reader of the novel, don't pay attention at all to the packaging of the novel, right? I'm so familiar with it, and so I'm used to it that I don't even think about it. I'm totally blind to the fact that I'm reading words on a page, let's say. So that's a thing to think about. I think that it's not necessarily bad for something to have let's say a predefined look and feel and packaging. So that's I'm getting kind of serious here, as I don't know why, but that's a point I want to make, is that the thing that I'm creating is definitely going to have, like, the engine, the games that it produces are definitely going to have a particular feel and a particular look, and I'm going for a particular feel and a particular look. Now I want to have what I'm calling the game writer, excuse me, rather than game developer. I like game writer better, because I'm really targeting narrative stories, or in particular emergent stories, not necessarily like a RenPy is good for a person has a particular story to tell, and they almost want to tell it in comic book format, right? Where it's like you're just going from scene to scene to scene to scene, right? Now you can have some choose your own adventure aspects to it and so forth, but it's very limited, let's say. Like, the author essentially, maybe there's a few different story paths that they choose that you can go down, right? But the writer has already fully fleshed out, all the entire tree of different possibilities that are possible. Whereas an emergent story is a little bit different, right? It essentially, what I'm conceiving this as, let's say, is that the writer writes little nuggets, little scenes, like little bits of dialogue, little character descriptions, and so forth. And the player, as they play the game, builds up in their head. They flesh out the story. So a good example of this in my mind is a game like, let's see here, like the Paradox Crusader Kings. So if you're not familiar, Paradox Interactive is, I guess they're a game publisher that publishes a set of games, right? That they're kind of well known for. So, and one of the major players is one called Crusader Kings. now they have another, they have Hearts of Iron and Victoria, and they have a whole host of other games, but they all kind of, again, they all kind of feel the same in a way. And what these are grand strategy games. But in particular, I'm going to talk about Crusader Kings, and I would definitely, if you're not familiar with Crusader Kings, maybe pause the video here, look up what it is, and then kind of come back here. I'm not going to go over what it is. I'm just going to assume you have knowledge of Crusader Kings. The interesting thing about Crusader Kings, the game, is that it is a truly vast open world. Like it's essentially Europe and maybe parts of Asia and Africa, from like the 900s to like I can't remember if it's the 1500s or the 1600s, something like that. That's its time period, and that's like it's the entirety of Europe and so forth. And it, there's thousands of characters that are, a lot of them are historical characters, but there's also just sort of generated characters as well. And it's just a truly vast kind of world that they've created here. Well, I guess it's a historical world, right? Right, that they've created. And but the player, as you play the game, you pick a particular count or duke or emperor or whoever you want to play as, and then you essentially play the game by running it. It's a real time sort of game, kind of, with there's pausing and so forth, lots of pausing. So, and it's not a what would you call it, like a Twitch game, like where you have to move units quickly on the screen or you die, right? It's more of a thinking sort of game. But the thing is that you develop attachments to these characters. Like you play as a particular character, and you play, you make all the decisions through that character's life, right? Maybe they live, say, 60 years or 80 years or something like that, right? And then when that character dies, you are kind of you essentially play the heir of that character, right? Because we're talking about the medieval period where there's kings and so forth. So you have heirs to your kingdom, and so the story continues, but you're playing as a different person. And that's just such a beautiful, I don't know if you want to call it conceit, but it's such a beautiful way of playing a character through their entire life. And you grow kind of attached to these characters at times, sometimes not. It depends on how you want to play. But you can develop attachments, and you can develop, like, there's other, obviously characters in the world that you love or despise, or maybe you're just sort of indifferent to, right? You have your maybe your vassals underneath you that, that maybe one vassal doesn't like you because you murdered their son or something like that. Crusader Kings gets real dark real quick sometimes. It's lovingly called, what is it called? The child murder simulator in some context. So it's a very much kind of an adult game, I would say, because it definitely deals with some dark themes. But anyway, that's a tangent. But the beauty of it is the emergent storytelling, as the game progresses, because it's, all sorts of random things happen during the course of the game, and obviously you're making decisions, and those impact the, what's going to happen in the future. And so this emergent narrative develops in these games, and that's part of the, for me at least, part of the joy of playing them, compared to let's say something like a Civilizations, right? Civilizations is another kind of grand strategy sort of game and so forth that has a lot of the maybe not a lot. It has similar mechanics, let's say, to Crusader Kings, where you got little armies that you can move around the screen and kind of take over territory and all that 4X kind of stuff. But the thing that Civilizations doesn't have is that emergent narrative, right? You're who you're playing as really does not matter, right? It's just the color of the territory on the screen almost, right? There's no people that you identify with and so forth. So there's not really an emergent story that happens. But in Crusader Kings, that does happen, and that's, for me at least, that's the sort of game that I really enjoy. And so that's the part of what I'm going to try to recreate in this game engine, right? Is effectively there's I'm not sure if it's just the visual aspects of it or the visual and the back. I think it's the entire thing. There's something called the Clausewitz. Let's see if I can't remember if I have yeah, whatever, it doesn't really matter. Anyway, so Paradox created an engine, right, to power all of these different games. And so it's going to be a little bit in that vein what I'm creating, right? Is an engine. I'll use this engine to almost certainly create my own game or games, like Paradox and the Clausewitz, if I'm pronouncing it correctly, which I might not be, engine. So that's sort of my goal at one level, right? Is to create this engine to help myself create games, the kind of games I want to create, but also my plan is to release the engine as well, right? Is to make it easy for other, like I said, I'm calling these people game writers. And what I mean by that, instead of a game developer, is a person who is not interested in the technical details of game development, right? All they want to do is they want to create an emergent narrative, and they want sort of a pre-existing framework that handles all the technical details. So my goal at the end of the day here is that one should be able to open up a text editor and write out your game just in the text editor. Now there will have to be some syntax and so forth, but I'm going to do my darndest to make that as easy and non-programmer friendly as I have the capabilities to do so. I will say that I've totally succeeded if I can take some random screenplay, let's say, off the internet and just load that screenplay in text format and have the game emerge from that screenplay, just the text, right? And maybe the description of, obviously it'll have, I'm not going to say obviously it has to whatever. Who knows what's possible with artificial intelligence and machine learning in the future and so forth. But that's my goal, is read in some text and the game, handles all of the, all the technical stuff. And there's just so much technical stuff that goes into game development, especially if you want it to kind of look decent. There's all sorts of, there's the visual side, the 3D, 2D graphics sort of side, but there's also a really deep aspect that kind of no one really talks about, I don't think, but it's also like the UI side, right? It's just the mechanics of the user interface. You have to create an application, right? In some cases, especially in these kinds of games, it's a very complicated application that you're creating, because you're having to display all sorts of information to the user and do it in a way that is easy and intuitive and just looks good, right? Like this is an art form, this is art, and so it can't just look utilitarian, right? It has to fit a theme, and it has to tell part of the story with the user interface. And so it's a big part of the game. But there's two aspects to it, right? There's the actual mechanics, let's call it, of the user interface, like just being able to drag a window or click a button or something like that. And then there's the look and feel of it, right? Which helps tell the story of what you're helps create the world that you're entering into. And so anyway, I just want to say that there's a lot of stuff involved there, and I don't want the game writer to have to deal with any of it potentially, but I almost certainly will also allow people to, if they have some skills in certain areas, I'm not going to lock them out of their skill set. I want to make this as accessible as possible, but I also don't want to how do I want to phrase this? I don't want to handcuff the game writer to the point where they really cannot manipulate anything, right? So if they want to have a new asset, like a new visual asset in the game, be that an image or, a texture for a 3D model or 3D model itself or what have you, I want them to be able to add that to their what they're creating. But that's just an additional extra, and I obviously try to make that as easy and as intuitive as possible as well. And I haven't starting of an editor that I'll go into. That's just going to be a long devlog, so it's 20 minutes, and I've let's see, where am I here? Let's see. So let's just kind of continue here. I think 20 minutes is a good point for. I should have hopefully convinced you that this is a thing that you're interested in or a thing that you're not interested in. And I would say that if at this point what I'm saying isn't 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 interesting to you, I'm just going to go into more and more details of what I've just described. So that, again, I'm giving you an out. You don't necessarily need to watch this entire thing. Let's see. It just to tell you a little bit of my plans for the future. I'm going to be continuing this thing for weeks, months, maybe years, right? Hopefully years. And so this is just sort of the beginnings of it. And so this is a little bit of this is just sort of documenting, where it all started and where it all began to some degree. So anyway, so this is where it starts, and this is where it all begins here. So let's see. Do I want to discuss all this, or is this just stuff you can read about? I think this is all stuff you can kind of read about. I'll go over I'll skip to the end here and tell you what my plans are as far as timeline. So this month, February, it's January 30th as I record this. So hopefully in the next week or so, I plan on releasing a tech demo of what I'm about to demonstrate in the YouTube video here, of what I've been up to here, and let people kind of play with it and just have fun seeing all the bugs, but at least kind of get a feel for it to some degree, right? These are just going to be tech demo releases. They're not going to be full featured in any sort of sense. There's going to be all sorts of bugs, but they'll at least kind of let you get a little bit of a taste for what I'm going after here. So that's February. By May, and this is just all sort of guesswork. I don't know if this is going to pan out or anything. By May, my goal here is to get a Steam page up and running, right? And to actually publicly announce. Now, you might say, well, this is kind of the start of the publicity in the project and so forth, and it is in a way. But I have a very small YouTube audience and a very small, just sort of audience in general, I guess I would say, on any of my social media, and so this isn't really, it's public, but only if you're really already a friend, effectively. So, but in May, I'll actually start really hammering the publicity. By July, hopefully I'll have an alpha, right? September, maybe a beta. And then December of 2022, to December of this year, my goal here is to have this engine, this in a game with the engine. It might be more of an example game, but it might be an interesting game that's interesting to play in and of itself. Released to Steam and my website. So the technology stack for this thing I'm developing is very web technology stack, right? It's TypeScript and Webpack and React, and I'm using Babylon JS for the 3D stuff, or at least for now. Who knows, I might switch to 3JS or something like that. But it's a very web focused sort of tech stack. I will do a thick client via Electron, But that's my goal is really to focus on the web. I at least as a development technology. Now, that's, obviously you can kind of take that and release it on any sort of platform or device. So who knows where it's going to really all end up, but the underlying technology is kind of web tech centric. And then here are my hopes and dreams. Maybe someday I'll hire some other developers and commission game writers and create marketplaces and host events and so forth. But, that'll be down the road if this thing really takes off and people really enjoy it and so forth. So that's sort of the upfront description, the wordy description. I've now told and not shown. So I've already committed the cardinal sin of storytelling here. Let me grab here a sip of coffee. Coffee with a bit of heavy cream. Good stuff here. All right. Stretch. All right. It's been going on for 26 minutes. Man, my devlogs are like little marathon sessions. But anyway, let's get into the game. So what you're seeing is I'll probably put a little video reminder here at 26 minutes and 30 seconds or so. This is where it really starts, right? This is the meat of the thing here. So this is me showing off what I've actually got off today. So here's the menu, right? So very, very simple menu. What do I want to show off here? First, let's start with gameplay, I think. Yes, let's create a new game. It's going to take a minute because assets are loading and things are being created. And, actually, for some reason, let me do that again. It's the demo is going horribly already. OBS is fighting me with. Let's see. I can move this on the screen. Can I click now? Will it let me click? There we go. All right, just had to click a couple of times. So this is, very simple UI. If the game is paused, note also that this does not fit in the window very well. So let me try to correct that a bit. Maybe if I do this. Maybe if I do this. Yes, I'm going to have to think about making this more of a reactive sort of application, aren't I? All right, so let's note that we're paused. We have some menus on the screen here and so forth. So this is the, obviously this is very rough sort of graphics and, and so forth. This is very much just development mode kind of user interface, but it shows off, it demonstrates the general style of gameplay that I'm going after here, where you have a world that you're effectively simulating. So that means that you can run and you can pause and so forth. And we got an event. So you've been running along here for a while. Let me see if I can make that a little better. All right, I think that's a little better. All right, so you're going to be playing the game, running the simulation, and these event dialogues. These events are just going to happen, right? And then you get to choose what you're going to do, right? Are you going to flee? Are you going to attack? Are you going to just talk it out? Whatever. And this is obviously just an example dialogue of, what could be happening here. You have, it's kind of a similar in a way to like a visual novel kind of graphic where you have your visual component and then your textual component, and then you make a decision of some sort. This is also, if you're familiar with Crusader Kings, it's modeled more or less on that event dialogue sort of style. Obviously, like I said, obviously the graphics are, don't pay attention to to them to any large extent. They're just placeholders for the large part. But notice that you can click. Like I click on this person, and I can see what they're about. You know, I can see who their friends and acquaintances are. I can see what their stats are. You know, they got 64% intelligence, whatever that means. That they're a female. You know, whatever. This is obviously just placeholders for stuff. And I can click on, like, let's click on Moani Triplet. Boy, there's a name. And look, I can see that, oh, that's what that person's all about and so forth. So this is, you know, their character sheet, and you kind of bring up, and the idea is that you can, you know, go into this anytime you want and bring. So this is your character. You're playing currently as Casely Pascua. I have no idea. I created this game and I have no idea how to pronounce any of the characters' names. And that's the beauty of it, right? That these are all programmatically generated sort of things. I'm using, you know, 3D models. Currently I'm using DAZ Studio model assets, because I think that's it seems to be the highest quality set of models that's sort of available, you know, at this particular point in time. I might, but you know, who knows? Maybe I'll go into Make Human, or maybe I'll go into, you know, there's all sorts of different environments, mix and match. You know, I'm not necessarily going to be tied to any one particular asset kind of style. So I plan on, like, you know, I will have 3D graphics. I will have obviously some 2D images and so forth, and mix and match and so forth. Now, actually, let me talk a little bit about that, like the actual models and so forth, and my ideas around how to make this, like I said, because at the end of the day, the goal here is for let me bring up the set of characters here while that's cooking. So I can get a little bit better view of them. My idea here is that the game writer they're just writing text, right? So they're not going to, I don't want them to have to open up Blender and do, you know, know anything about morphs and animations and skeletons and meshes and, you know, all that sort of stuff, right? I just want them to say, hey, I want a character. I want their hair to be red, let's say, and I want them to be, you know, slightly overweight, or you know, kind of old or kind of young, or, you know, whatever, you know, like kind of human sort of descriptions for what their characters are, and then I translate those into, you know, model assets that, you know, kind of paint the picture visually, like literally like a visual of what they describe. And, you know, and if they don't describe anything, I'll, you know, there's certain parameters that I'll use to generate characters in their world, right? So, you know, you want a bunch of old people in your world, well, you know, set the, you know, minimum population age to 58 or something like that, right? And then you're all the people in your world are kind of elderly, and you're telling a story about someone breaking out of the old folks home or something. I don't know, whatever the story that you're telling, right? Whatever it is you want to tell. And then I'll handle creating the game engine, you know. We'll handle creating unique characters with unique, you know, facial characteristics and so forth. My goals here, kind of long term, are for this to be a generational game. Like I definitely kind of like that sort of like long term gameplay where maybe you play as several different generations of a person and so forth. And, you know, people marry and they have kids, and I want their kids to kind of look like the parents and that sort of thing. So, you know, kind of like The Sims a bit in that aspect. I wish The Sims had gameplay. So unfortunately they've decided not to have gameplay in their game, but they do have a good looking visual system for creating their visuals of their characters and so forth that I think is pretty good, or at least was pretty good 10 years ago or whatever. Are they ever going to come out with a new Sims game? I don't know. Who knows? So anyway, so that's this is sort of the mechanics of how the person's going to navigate. Notice that you can move stuff around, and maybe there's a location button here, and you can have different locations, and you can have maybe you want to have multiple location screens up that you're running around and doing stuff with, and so it's a very much the UI. The goals for the UI are to make it easy for the player to deal with what kind of largish amounts of information easily. That's my goal. Now for the story writer, there will be things like locations and characters that they'll have access to, right? And they'll just create all the characters or create all their locations or have them auto magically generated using some sort of parameter set or something like that. And so they just describe, hey, I want to only be in characters in Florida or something like, they'll have some constraints that they're going to impose, and then the engine will work within those constraints to generate the locations, or if the person's rule specific, like I really only want to tell a story, all the characters are in New York. Well, then that's the engine should adhere to those constraints. But the story writer just has to say that the setting for my world is New York, and that's all they have to do, right? And the engine takes care of the rest. That's the goal. Anyway, I was getting sidetracked here a little bit. Daz, one of the reason I really like Daz Studio is because the models look really good, and there's assets for the models like clothing and hair and so forth that's kind of readily available with nice little in my humble opinion, kind of cheap interactive development licenses, so that I can buy them and embed them in the engine in the game, and so it's just a neat store for as a game developer without the skills to create all these good looking models and clothing and hair and so forth. It's just nice to be able to purchase that. And then I believe, I don't see any reason why I can't do this. I will essentially just, use these characters. Whoops, I keep bumping the table. Apologize for that. Use these characters in my game engine, embed them effectively in the engine, and allow the game writers access to these 3D model assets by just, effectively using my game engine. And now let me talk a little bit about how that's going to happen. So if you're familiar with, again, I'm going to keep going back to Paradox and Crusader Kings, because they did some stuff right. Some stuff they did not so right, but some things they did really right. One of the things that they did really right is how they the engine approaches the game content. And if you've ever messed with Crusader Kings, you realize that the financial model for Paradox, for at least the Crusader Kings series, is effectively to put out a game, kind of a base game, and then just create sort of an endless set of DLCs, downloadable content packages, that are effectively just mods to the game, that add a new era to the game, or a new game mechanic, or a new, it's usually fairly large, right? I can't remember how much they cost, like $10 or something like that. But, if you buy, 40 or 50 of them, it adds up. But at the end of the day, you've got this huge world with all sorts of content and so forth. And so and also as a player, right, I can create mods for the game, right? Because the entire how do I want to phrase this? All of the content that the engine runs is accessible, like it's just sort of available, like in the game folder itself, right? It's just text files with all the game content, which has, descriptions of all the characters and all the mechanics and all the decisions and traits and blah blah blah. And I, as a mod writer, just a player who wants to mod the game, whatever, I just create my own little mod, and I can mod the game however I want. And like I said, I can publish it if I want to. And the thing is that you can change the entire game with these, by just modifying the content, right? That the engine sort of exposes. And it's a beautiful system in a way, right? It allows you to write an entire, like I'm fairly certain one could just download Crusader Kings, rip out all of like the entire base of the base content of the game, which would be a huge endeavor to rewrite, but you could, and then create your own game using the Crusader Kings, quote unquote, as an engine, and just have a totally different game that plays out different, and so forth. Like there would be some, aspects that would be kind of baked in, but all of the content of the game, like all the characters and the visuals and, all the decisions that you would make and so forth, you can just write your own, right? And people do that with Crusader Kings. There's big, vast, huge mods and mod packs that just have, it's just unbelievable, really, what people have created with the game. And so that's a similar path I want to go down with my little game engine here. And that's how game writers will be able to craft their own story. Now, in my case, I'm going to have a very light sort of basic story, I imagine, right? That it's going to basically be more of a demo, I would say, of what the game engines is capable of. Like, maybe if I get creative or hire some good writers or something, maybe I can create a cool game that's just a cool game in its own right. But the idea is that, people will, purchase, let's say, the base game, let's call it that. And then, someone will write a really cool emergent story, right? Using my engine, right? Or my game. It gets real confusing whether you want to call it a game or game engine, right? But I'm going to use the term game engine. Using my game engine, they load, the player, right, purchases my game engine, which I haven't named yet. I need to give it a name. That'll make this a lot easier. And then loads the game writers. I'm calling these stories, my little mod or DLC pack or whatever I want to call them, stories. I kind of like that. It just sounds neat. So they load the game writer's story into this game engine, and the game engine effectively just becomes a player, right? So think in terms of an ebook, right? So you have an ebook, and then someone has publishes a someone writes their novel, and they put it in like EPUB format or the Kindle format or whatever, right? And makes it available either like a download. Let's use EPUB as an example. So you can put that anywhere, right? You can just give it away. You can put it on some sort of like Patreon website or Gumroad or however you want to do that. However you want to distribute your content, and then you have your reader, right? And you load your EPUB file, and you read the reader, and you read your novel, right? And so in the same way, I want the user to be able to kind of play the game, right? Read the game, if you want to call it that, right? So you have a game writer and you have a game reader, which that's a little bit weird terminology there, but it sort of fits because I really am trying to create a narrative here. This is more for narrative gameplay, right? And so having a game reader is sort of the vibe that I'm kind of going after. So anyway, so that kind of describes that to some degree. And you can see that I've kind of got the morphs working, and I kind of got the clothing working, and the clothing fits the morphs and blah blah blah, and got posing working, and so these are just technical feats I've accomplished, right? So this is it. If you're interested, I have on my Instagram, I post what I've what I've been up to and so forth. Let me grab some coffee here. And so I plan on continuing to post there. So if you're just interested in the technical aspects, and kind of just the look or whatever, that would be where to go there. So anyway, so how long we've been going now? 45 minutes. All right, I think we can wrap this up under an hour. And thank you for paying attention. If there's anyone left watching this stuff. So anyway, so we got the character here, and so this is essentially the gameplay, right? Is that you're searching through your your world, and you click on this character, and maybe you interact with them. Like right now, you can't really do much interaction except debug and preferences. I can't remember what that does exactly. Oh, there we go, debug. Yeah, so you can see all the stuff about the character and yeah, whatever. But eventually you'll be able to right click on the character, and there we go. So we can set whether they desire a friend or a job, or they want food, whatever they want here. So anyway, that's the the gameplay kind of loop and the visuals that I'm going after at a very obviously this is a wireframey kind of level of what I've produced here. So it's like I said, the graphics look horrible, but hopefully they at least get the intent across. So with that, let's reload here. Actually, I don't have to reload. Let's see if it'll work without reloading. It probably will break everything, but pause. You know what? Let's just reload. It's very, very alpha. So let's go back to the main menu here. And this time, let's open the editor. So this is the editor section. And so this is kind of what I've been working on most recently. And this is really the meat of it in a sense, right? So there's the gameplay aspect of playing the game. So this is like your ebook reader kind of thing, you can flip through the pages of the book and so forth. And this is more the writing aspect of it. So this is as a game writer or mod author or whatever you want to, however you want to term it, this is what you would be interacting with. And so you would open a story. Like I said, I call my little mods or DLC packs or whatever you want to call them. I call them stories. And then you view files or you open the story. So these are all files located on the user's hard drive. And there's a neat thing in the browser where you can actually read files direct from the hard drive these days if you request permissions and so forth. So anyway, so you can open the story. I've already got some stuff baked up. So what do I want to say? First of all, let's just show off that I can, you can view 3D models and so forth. Ooh, look at that. All right, and you can interact with them. So let's say that you have a slider here that you want to, slide the door or whatever. I also have it so that you can create new sliders. So let's say that, H30 fridge _ 7053 _ blah, blah, blah is pretty hard thing to type in a text document or remember what it is and so forth. And so what you can do is you can just rename that to like open, right? And hit create and you're good to go, right? And so that's effectively what this menuing system is. And that's more or less also the way that, at least for now, this might change. I don't know. This is sort of where I'm going to have to work with it. I'm going to have to work out all the bugs and the user interface and why this doesn't work or why this isn't easy. This is the magic-y sort of part here. Is 3D models are kind of difficult to deal with especially when you animate them and morph them and so forth, right? Now there's, at some level, it's become easy, right? Oh, wow, I just have to create this slider or whatever, but there's a lot of stuff behind that slider that you have to know, like how to export the morph with your 3D model in Blender or what have you. And so there's a lot of technical stuff behind the scenes there to make it even this easy. And this is still not super easy, right? Because it's got all these horrible names and so forth. And so this is just to make it a little bit easier, right? Is I'm anticipating that there might be some people that know something about, or at least if nothing else, this is helpful for me as the developer of the engine and so forth. I export out the morphs and the animations and so forth about the mesh, and obviously I'll also get into texturing and all sorts of junk like that. So I export it out, and then it's going to come out as kind of gobbledygook, right? It's going to be ugly when it comes out of Blender, right? And because Blender is going to have its own way of doing stuff and everything, and then when I import it into the game engine, let's say Babylon, I'm using Babylon JS right now for that, it's going to have its own little say on how it looks inside the game engine. And I just want to hide all of that from the user's perspective, but I have to kind of show some of it to be able to interact with it. So this is kind of the ugly part. These are the needles of the cactus, right? That you're having to touch, right? But hopefully you can kind of put, hopefully I'm going to make this, I keep saying hopefully, I am going to make this easy to deal with. And this is my, rough attempt at the moment to make that easy to deal with. So anyway, but enough about that. So I can do that. I can describe stuff. I can add a chair to the scene. Is that going to work? Yeah, it does work. So you can see I can add stuff into the scene and so forth. So anyway, that's obviously just some simple stuff there. And then this is where the real deal is. So I'm going to open up this dialog. And so this, and I need to be able to, I haven't got in my windowing system yet that you can drag handles and make the windows larger or smaller. So you don't have to deal with this window size for now. So my eventual goal is for the user to be able to use, their text editor of choice, right? Because any writer, anyone who deals with text, I believe has very, they know the editor they like and they want to stick with it. And I definitely want to respect that. A little bit more coffee there, but I need to have something that I can, deal with inside the engine as well to make little simple edits. So anyway, so this is the dialog text, right? So this I had to create my own little scripting language, obviously, and so I can parse it and so forth. And so this is the language that I've created for the moment. None of this is set in stone, but this is more or less the feel for where it is right now. Like I said, my archetype, if you want to call it that, is like a screenplay. Like if you've ever viewed a screenplay in an example, just Google screenplay, and there's a sort of a format to a screenplay where you've got you describe the scene and the setting, and then you set the location, whether it's an interior or exterior sort of thing, and then you essentially just have dialogue, right? And the characters speak, and that's really kind of the or if you've ever seen like a play or something like that, how it's written out, right? There's a certain little format to the how the text is written, and so there will be a little format to how the text is written here. But I'm going to try to make that format as syntax free as possible. Now, right now I'm kind of it's not perfect. Like right here, it's like you have to know that there's this keyword called setting, and then there's another keyword called background, and you have to know that there's these little bracket things and so forth. So I'm not real happy or proud of the syntax that I'm opposing currently. It's not horrible, but it's if I could get rid of all of it, I would. And so I might do that. I mean, I'm kind of halfway playing around with the idea of doing some machine learning sort of stuff, but the where I can just sort of extract stuff from the text. But the problem with that is it's going to be very bug ridden, and bug ridden in a way that makes it difficult for the user to know how to fix their problem. At least with a kind of a known syntax, it's very easy to know, well, I screwed up, I didn't put a comma, right? And I can tell the user, hey, you got to put a comma here, and so it's rather than, I'm trying to, if I just have, the just read some text and then just sort of try to glean from the text what the user's intent is. It's it's a little bit more amorphous, and it's a little bit, I think it can be a little bit harder for the user to deal with. But that might be that's a potential road that I might I'll almost certainly at least play with down the road, and I might use in limited little areas where it makes sense. And I'm just going to be very hand wavy about that for the moment. So you can see here, you can do things like open the fridge, like we had that fridge and we had that little slider window and so forth. And then, obviously this is, talking about what this is this is a dialogue scene, and that I anticipate that's going to be where most of the content of the game is written, is in the form of dialogues. There might be other little bits and pieces as well, but that's at least one major aspect of it will be dialogues, because that's where the decision points happen in the narrative. And so you have narration, hey, he's walking into the kitchen. So this is just again, to give you a little heads up here. This is just, the wife finds husband in the kitchen drinking milk direct from the carton. A very simple sort of example dialogue here. So I'm talking about, let's just go over this kind of at a high level, but kind of quickly. So we have the setting that describes the setting. There's a fridge in the setting. There's a background with a certain image, blah, blah, blah. Criteria. So this is what, this right here is describing, these things have to exist for this dialogue to fire. And so, the world, has to be someplace, minus 1700 and before, sometime during the day, effectively, right? And there has to exist a thing. Like wife and husband here, these are, you kind of think of as variables if you're familiar with programming, or just placeholders if you want to not have to deal with programming terminology. And they will be kind of filled in by the engine, finding someone who meets this criteria, someone who has some woman who's fairly angry, or maybe has an anger level above 20. I don't know. Who knows what that means, right? These stats and traits are going to be left up to the game writer to decide what those mean, what those are, and what those values mean, and so forth. So these are just effectively just kind of tags and text and so forth. There has to be a thing called a spouse that's linked to the wife. The husband has to be kind of mirthful, and blah, blah, blah. All right. And then you have your narration section. So this is like the, if you want some of the, this could be optional or whatnot. This is like the narrator talking, walking into the kitchen. You catch your husband about to drink straight from the carton. So you have to have both sides, notice, of the narration. So this is a dialogue. So there could be whether you're the player character, the game player, the person playing this particular character, you don't know whether you're the husband or the wife. And also the NPCs in the game world as it develops, right, will be firing off these dialogue events as well, right? Because the part of the beauty of an emergent narrative is that, the NPCs in a sense are kind of quote unquote real in a sense, right? And they live their own little lives, and their little dramas happen to them as well. right? And events happen to them and they make decisions and so forth. And then there's history about those decisions that kind of affects their future. That's the whole thing as well, right? Like think of, if you're familiar with like a dwarf fortress or something like that, right? That's probably the granddaddy of that kind of idea or concept, right? Of this huge world with all these characters and vast history behind all the characters and so forth. And so that's uh, that's part of what developing an open world is with an emergent narrative. And so what that means is that when you write out a scene is you have to write both sides of the scene from all the different participants' perspective. In this case, there's only two, but there could be one or five or who knows. Blah 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 dialogue. Okay, so here's where it gets kind of interesting, is where you describe the wife, and then where you're going. Don't do that. So this is what she might be saying, and then we have the actual options of the dialogue, right? Of like these would be the buttons, right? So you can slap the person, or you can cry, you can sigh forcefully, and then these are the effects. Like if you slap your husband, there's a 10% chance he'll lose -10 health, let's say. There's a 20% chance he'll become embarrassed. There's a 60% chance that you'll become ashamed, right, for slapping your husband. The poor guy didn't deserve it. And then there's a 90% chance, though, that you'll lose 30 stress, because, it's sometimes you just got to hit someone, I guess. And then, obviously from the husband's perspective, the same thing. So now that you've seen the text part of it, let me show you some of the magic. So this is, it's going to take a minute to load up all of the 3D assets. Obviously I'll make this better and faster and so forth down the line, but this shows you what this actually looks like, right? So this is the magic, right? This is the payoff, right? This is what I've been working towards, is the person actually, I wrote about this little scene in a text editor, right? That's all I had to know about was the text editor. I did have to dump some, some things in the directory here. The GLB files are the 3D models, and there's the images and so forth. So I did have to, I did a little prep work. But my goal here is that all of this would be embedded with the kind of the base assets, let's call them, of the engine. So you wouldn't even have to do that, but you could add them if you wanted. And you create this dialogue scene, right, where from the perspective of the wife, she's walking into the kitchen, you catch your husband about to drink milk straight from the carton, and you have your different options, and then I'm showing off what the effects are, and what the percent, the NPC equals 13 means there's a 13% chance the NPC will do this if given the option, because you have to remember that the NPCs, I'm not sure exactly how complicated I'm going to get with modeling their interactions and how they're going to want to work with the world, because it could get real complicated real quick, and I'm not sure that would necessarily add to either the gameplay, or from the game player's perspective, or add anything from the game writer's perspective of whether it would actually be meaningful. So I think just for right now, I'm just going with the flat percent chance that the NPC that where this dialogue option was available, they'll pick that particular option. That is more or less how that works in the Crusader Kings engine. Is kind of where I picked up that idea. It's a little bit more complicated there, and I guess that's another thing to talk about as well, is that I love if I'm pronouncing it correctly, the Clausewitz engine, as far as the concept of it, the syntax of the language, and is just horrific. It's very proprietary. I've never seen anything like it in my whole life, except for dealing with that particular engine. I'm sure it's modeled off of something, and it's maybe, I don't know, maybe it's whoever designed that engine, that was their idea how to do it. And I understand why they did the things that they did, but it's very complicated. Like that's the reason why you really can't use Crusader Kings as a game engine where you just want to create your own story and so forth, because you have to be very kind of knowledgeable in the syntax of the language and how it works and so forth. And it's a real pain to deal with and understand. And it's not super well documented, and obviously Paradox isn't. They're not treating their game as a real game engine, so they're not really. I mean, they're kind of supportive. They're mod developers and so forth, but they're not really. They don't really have a lot of documentation. Where I plan on this is like the game writers or mod creators, whatever you want to call them. They're kind of first class citizens in my world, and so I'll in fact they might even be above the actual game player in terms of my focus for who I'm going after, right? So I'm going to make that a very, very good experience. So anyway, so you can kind of see you have the models here, and one of the neat things you can do here, if I can click, here we go, is like look at her expression. Let's see if I can change her expression. I'm doing this live, which is, let's say, so she's got 20. Oh no, that's her. Let's go down to angry 15%. Let's make her a little bit less angry. Let's make her 5% angry. Oh look, she looks a little bit. Let's make her 0% angry. Look, now she looks kind of neutral. You can also kind of mess with this in ugly ways. Let's make her 30% angry, right? Or 100, which is going to really make it look horrible because the Morse, and I didn't really do a good job of mapping them correctly. But anyway, you can see that I've changed her expression by just changing this percent value, right? I want to make her rotate a little bit more, right? Like she's facing that looks a little better, I think, right? Kind of gets the point across. And maybe I don't want to make her 50%. Maybe I want to make her 10%, like little tiny. Whoop, that's 100%. Little tiny, or like I said, 100%. Well, you can go 200% if you just want to go off the screen, right? So right now there's not a lot of boundaries that I'm making you kind of, but that's in a way I kind of like that, right? Because it's note that it kind of, like what I've created right here with this visual, right? Very quickly, this tells the story in itself, right? Like let's say you opened up a dialog box, right? And it looked like that, right? Well, obviously that's its own little look and feel to the game is what that brings. It also, it's like it says something, right? So there's kind of a storytelling aspect to how the graphics are positioned and so forth, and being able to, quote unquote, break the rules is, can give it a kind of an interesting, unique feel. Like for instance, the guy's character, the husband's character here, his arms kind of hanging halfway off the screen and so forth. That looks just kind of visually interesting and neat, right? So I don't want to necessarily, I'm not going for correct, I'm not trying to hamstring the writer and make them obey rules and so forth. Knowing the rules and then breaking them, with elegance and style is really part of any artistic endeavor. So anyway, I think that might be about it. That might be the what we're trying to show off here, and kind of gives you a taste for where I am currently and where I'm headed and so forth. And it's been a little bit over an hour, so if you've stuck with me this long, well, you're probably interested. give me a shout out, and I'm looking for people that would be interested in creating stories like this, right? Would be interested in, like, someone who would be interested in doing a visual novel, let's say, that's a little bit more advanced. and you know, they have maybe an interesting story they want to tell, or they just want to play with new technology or something. I don't know. I guess what I'm saying here is that I'm kind of looking for people who might be wanting to be beta testers and so forth. So if you're or alpha testers, pre-alpha testers, if that's a word. So if you're interested in that, shoot me a message somewhere. You can find all my socials on my website. You know, and you know, or leave a comment wherever you find this, and that you're interested, and we'll get together, and I'll make sure that you have access to the game or the engine. Anyway, with that being said, thank you for your time and attention, and I do plan on putting one of these out at least weekly for at least the foreseeable future, and it'll be interesting to see how far the game progresses, or the game engine. I use those words interchangeably. Over time, we'll see. Hopefully, you know, from there's a neat quote about from small beginnings, great things happen, or something. I can't remember what it is, but hopefully this will. Yeah, I'll look back on this, you know, years from now, and I'll think, oh my God, this was so horrible, but it all started from here. Anyway, thanks a lot for your time and your attention, as I said, and I'll catch you guys later. Bye. Well, if I can stop, I can never stop the recording. There we go.